How can he cooperate with the leadership in Britain when he's been most insulting, his comments have been most degrading? He doesn't respect any other world leader except Putin.
Is that odd?
Not odd at all. I mean, if you understand international relations and so on, it's not odd at all. I mean, Putin belongs to a special category. You understand? I listened to one of the leaders of the European Union describe an encounter with Putin. And she says that if you're going to have a meeting with Putin, you have to prepare extra. Otherwise, you'll be embarrassed. And one of his first pronouncements is that he wants to own the Panama Canal. And he's still pursuing that ambition. It doesn't end there. He actually wants Canada of all countries,
his neighbor,
to become the 52nd state of the United States of America. And it doesn't end there. He looks at the beautiful island of Cuba with 11 million people. And he says, look, my foreign minister will be the best president for Cuba. And we are beginning to wonder what is happening. It doesn't end there. He moves straight to Greenland. He says, I want Greenland. I'll buy it. But if they refuse to sell it to me, I'll take it by force of arms. And it doesn't end there. He sees Venezuela, one of the countries with the largest production of oil and so on. And he says, I want Venezuelan oil. He sends special forces into Venezuela. The president is abducted and taken to New York. And he says, Venezuelan oil belongs to me. And he actually makes a public announcement that anybody who wants to deal with Venezuela on its oil should not go to Caracas, but should come to him in Washington. And so, this is the guy we are talking about.
So where is the Israel connection? We've seen what you say Trump is, and why Israel?
Well, Israel has become a convenient bedfellow in this crazy, crazy move to dominate the world.
Mr. Kwasi Pratt Jr., happy to be here with you.
Happy to be here with you too.
I want us to jump out of Ghana and look at the world. There's currently a war going on between Israel and US on one side and Iran. First of all, how does that make you feel?
I feel very terrible. There's a completely needless war. It's a war which is not serving the interests of the people of the United States or even the people of Israel. There's a war which is against everything that mankind has stood for. And I think it's most despicable. Look, let's start from the United States of America. The US is definitely a power in decline. Its infrastructural deficit is huge. I mean, anybody who has recently visited the Underground Railway network in New York cannot help but see this decline. It's horrible. It's the worst underground railway system in any part of the modern world. US government itself says that its bridges are on the verge of collapse. They need to be redone. You come to look at the level of desperation on the streets of Washington. The unemployed people, the homeless people, the drug addicts and so on. Huge numbers. You're not talking about hundreds, you're talking about thousands. You understand? On the streets of Philadelphia, people who can't feed themselves, who depend on the soup, chicken, kitchen and so on. You understand? Access to education is limited. The level of illiteracy in the US is huge. So come to think of it, this is a country which is spending billions, almost $2 billion a day, prosecuting an absolutely senseless war. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. Only a couple of days ago, Donald Trump actually is asking for $200 billion to go and explode bombs in the Gulf, kill people, put US soldiers at risk, and so on. How can this make sense?
Why do you think he is acting the way he's acting?
Because he's who he is. And who he is a president who is not properly informed about global affairs. It's a president whose thinking capacity is impaired. It's a president of the United States of America who sees himself more as an emperor than anything else. And let me explain. You see, the Venezuelan opposition leader, Machado, gets a Nobel Peace Prize. Trump believes that the prize rightly belongs to him and is able to bully this woman to surrender the prize to him. That's the kind of guy we're talking about. They're talking about a guy who becomes president of the United States of America, and one of his first pronouncements is that he wants to own the Panama Canal. And he's still pursuing that ambition. It doesn't end there. He actually wants Canada of all countries,
his neighbor,
to become the 52nd state of the United States of America. And it doesn't end there. He looks at the beautiful island of Cuba with 11 million people, and he says, look, my foreign minister will be the best president for Cuba. And we are beginning to wonder what is happening. It doesn't end there. He moves straight to Greenland, and he says, I want Greenland. I'll buy it. But if they refuse to sell it to me, I'll take it by force of arms. And it doesn't end there. He sees Venezuela, one of the countries with the largest production of oil and so on. And he says, I want Venezuelan oil. He sends special forces into Venezuela. The president is abducted and taken to New York. And he says, Venezuelan oil belongs to me. And he actually makes a public announcement that anybody who wants to deal with Venezuela on its oil should not go to Caracas, but should come to him in Washington. And so, this is the guy we are talking about.
So where is the Israel connection? We've seen what you say Trump is, and why Israel?
Well, Israel has become a convenient bedfellow in this crazy, crazy move to dominate the world. And you must understand very clearly that Israel has territorial ambitions. I mean, only recently a top official in Israel claimed that virtually the whole of the Middle East and the Gulf, and so on, belongs to Israel.
How?
You heard it.
Yes, I did.
But, they said that God gave it to them.
Oh, okay.
And that's a strange claim, okay? It's a strange claim because the state of Israel was founded by the Zionist movement. The Zionist movement instigated the state of Israel. The leaders of the Zionist movement were atheists. They didn't believe that God exists. Now, if you don't believe that God exists, if God doesn't exist, how does God give you a gift?
Because he's not there.
He's not there, so he can't give you a gift. So how could atheists establish a state on the assumption that it's a gift from God that they don't believe in? It doesn't make sense. Now, when you come to discuss Israel, we in Africa ought to be a little more careful, okay? Because in the 1940s, when Britain and others were looking for land for the establishment of a Jewish state, Africa was considered. As a matter of fact, they wanted to establish that Jewish state in today's Uganda. So imagine if Israel had been established in Uganda. Then ask yourself, which land did God really give to the Israelis? Was it in Africa or it was in the Middle East? How could God have gifted a land not knowing where the land was located? If it's in Africa, it's in Africa. If it's not in Africa, it's not in Africa. So there's a whole lot of confusion. Now, because of this ambition, territorial ambition, the ambition to acquire more land and so on, Israel has been very, very aggressive. In 1948, it launched an offensive to drive out the indigenous Arabs, and that led to what is now known in history as the Nakba, the day of catastrophe. And hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were driven out of their homes and so on, in order for them to gain access to their land. I mean, the recent happenings in Gaza, everybody knows. I mean, even the UN, has taken a position. South Africa is leading the charge to ensure that Israel eventually gets charged with genocide and so on. So we know that. So given this reality and the reality of the United States of America under Donald Trump, there's a certain convenience which makes this convergence possible. And that's what we are seeing.
Why should Africans be concerned?
For many reasons. One, because Africans, like all people all over the world, believe in justice. We have a commitment to justice. We have a commitment to building a new world in which weapons of mass destruction have no place. We have a commitment to building a new world in which bullies are not tolerated. So that's on one level. The other level is just the impact. Over the last 3-4 days, the prices of fuel are shooting up at our pumps. That's a reality that Africans have to live with. We are told that this war would affect agriculture in the most dramatic way, because chemical fertilizers, the supply of chemical fertilizers will be impeded. That's a fact. That would affect us. We believe, as Africans, in a rule-based international order, a world order that is certain, and so on. This is undermining that world order, and it is to the detriment of the African people, and so on. So that's the reality.
Who can stop the US and Israel?
The working people of the world are the only people who are the final arbiters in all of these struggles. It's the working people of the world who produce the instruments of violence. It's the working people of the world who are going to produce the $200 billion that Donald Trump needs to control to continue this war and so on.
You think he can't just print the money? Go to that. Just print more dollars for me.
Yeah, but there's no printing press in Donald Trump's bedroom. It's still the working people who will print the money. You understand? So if the working people decide that they would not work for bigots, they would not work for warmongers, they would not work for systems of governments which are oppressive and imperialistic in nature, it will come to an end. And that day will soon come.
You've been to Venezuela before?
Yes.
What was it like when you visited that country?
Well, the first time I went to Caracas, Venezuela, was the time when the Chavez fever was gripping everybody.
Former President Hugo Chavez.
Hugo Chavez. Chavez had taken power and has started a reconstruction project which is supported by the vast majority of the Venezuelan people. There was a lot of enthusiasm everywhere in Caracas for building a new Venezuela and so on. That was the first time I went to Venezuela. Now, subsequently, I've been to Venezuela on many occasions. I think on 3 occasions as part of the international observer team to observe their elections. So I have practical experience. Traveled around the country supervising or observing, elections and so on. And I've been there for conferences and so on,
You hear from the press in the US and Europe that the elections are flawed. But if you observe the elections, is there a disconnect with what they say and what you saw?
But what I saw as an election observer was absolutely free and fair elections. And mind you, I was not the only person who was there. I was part of the African team, observer team. There was the European observer team, and there was a North American observer team, and so on. And all of us came to the conclusion that the elections we had observed were free and fair. In fact, better organized than elections in the United States of America, and so on. But don't listen to me. Listen to Donald Trump. If you want to have a verdict on the quality of the elections which were held in Venezuela, don't listen to me. Listen to Donald Trump. You see, Nicolas Maduro is abducted and taken to New York for trial. And Donald Trump is dealing with the deputy president under Nicolas Maduro. And there are questions, and they asked him, why? Why are you not recognizing the people who you claim won the elections as the legitimate government of Venezuela? What was Donald Trump's response? He said, they have no credibility. The people of Venezuela don't respect them. I'm sure you heard that.
Yes.
So if the people of Venezuela don't respect the opposition, think that the opposition has no credibility and so on, how could they have won the elections? So don't listen to me, listen to Donald Trump. Donald Trump provides the answers. He says that the Venezuelan opposition has no credibility. It is not respected by the Venezuelan people. And that it's better to do business with the Maduro administration. And that is why since the abduction of Maduro, he's doing business with the remnants of the Maduro administration.
So your reading of the abduction of the Venezuelan head of state is, and the reason for that is?
And Donald Trump has said that also very clearly, to control Venezuelan resources. You understand? To control Venezuelan resources. Donald Trump has announced to the world that he is in charge of Venezuelan oil. That the U.S. will sell Venezuelan oil. And that all their national requirements, national imports and so on, should come through the U.S. Clear. That's the reason for taking over Venezuela.
What is the reaction of the Venezuelan people?
From what I know, at least 200 people were killed in the effort to abduct Nicolas Maduro, which suggests that there was a fight. About 33 Cubans or so were killed in the process of abducting Nicolas Maduro. They used their most sophisticated arsenal. If you listen to the guards, they were blinded. They couldn't hear because they used sound impairing, equipment and so on. They used everything in their arsenal. That does not suggest an easy ride, for the forces which entered Caracas to capture Maduro. But since then, what has happened? The streets of Venezuela are controlled almost entirely by the colectivos and the Chavistas. Why is the Venezuelan opposition? Where is the Venezuelan opposition? Why is it manifesting? Even at the point where the U.S. is holding a gun to the head of the leaders of Venezuela, you don't find opposition manifestations.
How do you think it will end with President Maduro?
I'm not so sure that he's likely to get a fair trial. But if he got a fair trial, there's no evidence against him for involvement in narco trade and so on. So you have to be discharged. You have to go home a free person. But even if there's an unfair trial, the world, the progressive world, the world of nationalists, the world of genuine Democrats, the world of socialists and so on, is mobilizing around the clock and putting pressure on the U.S. for its release. One day, ultimately, maybe sooner, Nicolas Maduro will be released like many others before him.
How do you think the Iran, the Israel-US conflict will pan out?
I don't know. I've never been a soothsayer, and I don't intend to be one. What is clear today is that the calculations of the US and Israel are not much enough. In the beginning, the claim was that this whole war was going to take 3 days. And then it was extended to 1 week, and then 2 weeks. Now we are hearing from the Pentagon that this war could last until September, end of September. And that's only an estimation, you understand? This could end up being one of the forever wars that Donald Trump was against.
Will the American people punish him at the midterm elections, do you think?
Oh, certainly. And Trump is panicking. I mean, the Republicans are panicking about what the possibility would be in the midterm elections. I mean, everybody knows that. They are panicking. Because you see, fuel prices in some states have moved from a little over $2 to $8 a gallon.
Times 4.
Yeah. In some states, you know, averagely petroleum prices in the U.S. as of yesterday was around $4 or $5 a gallon. That's a huge increase. Okay? One of the reasons why people in the United States voted for Trump was that he promised to deal with the cost of living crisis. He's worsened it. You know, he's worsened it. And there are people from his own mega movement who think that this war is particularly senseless.
And the Europeans don't want to help him. He's appealing for help.
How can they? You see, we ought to understand what is happening in the world very clearly. As we speak, Donald Trump is supporting the far right in Britain against the established political parties, the Labour Party and the Conservatives. He wants them out of power to be replaced by the far right. So he's at loggerheads with the government in the United Kingdom. As we speak, Donald Trump is supporting the far right in France and Germany against the established political parties. How does he expect parties that he's subverting to come to his aid? In any case, they were not even consulted before he unleashed this war. And he's been most critical of the governments there and most insulting to the leaders in these countries. Let's take the case of Spain. The US has a military base in Spain. When it got its back against the wall, it wanted to use the military base in Spain to attack Iran and makes the request. And the Spanish leadership says, no, we would not allow you to use the military base here for this, your reckless war. What is his reaction? You know his reaction. Donald Trump then says that, oh, the people of Spain are very sensible and so on, but their leaders are stupid. You heard him say that?
I did.
Yes. How can he cooperate with the leadership of Spain?
So he's boxed himself into a corner.
How can he cooperate with the leadership in Britain when he's been most insulting, his comments have been most degrading? He doesn't respect any other world leader except Putin.
Is that odd?
Not odd at all. I mean, if you understand international relations and so on, it's not odd at all. I mean, Putin belongs to a special category. You understand? I listened to one of the leaders of the European Union describe an encounter with Putin. And she says that if you're going to have a meeting with Putin, you have to prepare extra. Otherwise, you'll be embarrassed. Now, this is a guy who walks into a meeting without notes. And he knows every subject under the sun in detail. So you don't trip before Putin. Putin was well prepared for leadership. He understands the world. His depth of knowledge is beyond people like Trump and so on. You know, Putin is a master of the game, especially having worked with the Soviet intelligence services and risen to the rank of a colonel and so on. And he's been around for a long time. He worked as the chief of staff of Boris Yeltsin and so on. He's a special category. He belongs to a special category. You understand? And God knows when he meets with Donald Trump, the kind of conversations they have. What does he tell him? Because every time he's met with Donald Trump has come out to the meeting praising Putin to the high heavens. In fact, last week, I read a statement which had been made by Donald Trump, and it was interesting. Donald Trump is saying that, look, Zelensky should learn from Putin, and that somebody should go and tell Zelensky to learn how to make deals.
The Ukrainian president.
Yes, how to make deals. And that Putin is ready to make deals. The problem is Zelensky. This is Donald Trump. What has he seen in Putin? What has Putin said to him or done to him? Nobody knows. We will never know. Perhaps we will never know.
And now that you brought Zelensky in, I mean, what is the fate of that whole conflict? Because now it seems that the whole attention is now in the Middle East, but there's a Ukraine-Russia conflict raging on, and America is involved in some way.
It's another completely needless conflict. We shouldn't have had that war. Averting that war was very simple and easy. Look, all that NATO had to do was to concretely assure Russia that it was not interested in attacking Russia, and there would have been no war. But they kept boasting that we're going to station weapons in Ukraine which could hit Moscow in 3 minutes. Yeah. Who is going to sit down and allow that? Who, in his right senses, is going to sit down for any country or any group of countries to go and plant weapons in a nearby country which can hit their capital in 3 minutes?
It's not going to happen, yeah.
You understand? Mm-hmm. So this war was avoidable. This war has also had very serious repercussions, especially for Europe. I mean, Germany's economy was on the rise. Today, Germany's economy is tumbling as a result of this war. The Europeans have had to pump billions of euros into this war, and they are going nowhere. They are also doing this at a time when the unemployment rate is rising in their countries. Britain is running an inflationary rate of about 30%. And yet they are compelled to look for resources to pump into Ukraine. It doesn't make any sense at all. So it's a completely needless war. It's a war which should never have been fought. And they should have allowed diplomacy, to take the center stage. And there would have been no war. And
it's now over 4 years.
And we don't see any solution in sight. That's the sad part of it. Yeah. And listen, now, in the negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, one of the cardinal things that is being discussed is how much land Ukraine is ready to cede to Russia. If you are going to cede land now, why did you fight? What did you fight for? It doesn't make sense. And sometimes when I sit back and look at the world and developments in the world, I just wonder the caliber of people who have assumed the leadership of the world today.
You're disappointed, eh?
Well, disappointment is a very mild word. I just wonder. I mean, you can no longer find the Sukarnos.
Indonesia, yeah.
You can no longer find the Lenins. The Nkrumahs are off the stage, the Modibo Keïtas, and so on. You can't find them anywhere. These great leaders have been replaced by Trump. These great leaders have been replaced by Jesus Christ. It's shocking how within a space of 50 years, the quality of leadership around the world has changed so dramatically. Where can you find a Fidel Castro today?
Did you ever meet him?
No, I never met Fidel, which is,
You would have loved. What kind of conversations would you have had with him?
Well, I've seen Fidel at a distance. Mm-hmm. I've been at conferences when he's standing. I've been at conferences where he's standing at the podium and talking to us, but not a one-on-one conversation. I've actually received an honorary award signed by him. It was supposed to be presented by him.
Okay.
But then he had this accident, I think the week before I was to go to Havana to receive the award, so it was presented by somebody else and so on. But Fidel is a remarkable leader. I mean, so charismatic, and it's not just about his charisma is not empty. Very well informed, very well read, understands the world like the back of his hand. And so on. And there have been so many such great leaders around the world.
So the world misses great people like this?
Of course. Mm-hmm. Look at what the world has become.
How about
after 1945, the Second World War, the end of the Second World War, there was a lot of hope that this world could be reset. and that we have a better world than we had, which led to the First and Second World Wars and so on. There's a lot of hope. There was the surge of the national liberation movements, the gaining of independence by many countries in Africa and so on. There's a lot of hope. All of that hope is withered away. And that's a big problem.
I'll ask you a couple of questions on one of the great leaders who you admire. But just before that, I'm thinking about just on current contemporary issues. Where's the role of China in all that we see right now? Russia, Ukraine, Israel, USEV, Iran, abduction of Venezuela's president. What's the role of China in all of this?
China has a foreign policy which serves its interests the best, but which many people around the world actually feel that it's not helping to reset the world. China's foreign policy is basically non-interventionist.
They don't interfere?
No. Mm-hmm. China feels that all countries, all people should be able to solve their problems. China argues that its model of development is based on the Chinese reality, and that no country must be compelled to adopt China's model of development. My understanding is that today, China is focusing attention on its own development, satisfying the needs of its people, improving its own national infrastructure, and so on. And China is doing very, very well.
And they have a lot of people to take care of.
Oh, wow. But China is doing very, very well. I mean, anybody who has been to Shanghai would not sacrifice Shanghai for New York. I mean, the difference is huge. I was in Shanghai during the hurricane. I was in my hotel and saw the force of the hurricane, trees being uprooted and so on. Total chaos on the streets of Shanghai. My brother, 45 minutes after the hurricane, there was no sign that the hurricane had passed through Shanghai. The streets were clean, the debris had been removed and so on.
45 minutes?
45 minutes after the hurricane had passed through Shanghai. You understand? So this is the reality. I mean, China is making advances, serious advances. And China doesn't want to be distracted. Now, because of this posture, the forces of imperialism appear to have a lot of strength. Because China is not confronting anybody. China is allowing them, to do as they please and so on. To some extent, that's very sensible policy. Okay. But to another extent, I think that we would have wished that China did a lot more in the protection of vulnerable states. One of the things that I say about Chinese foreign policy is simply this. Well, you don't want to go to war over Venezuela, fine. You don't want to go to war over Iran, fine. You would not send your troops to protect African countries, fine. That's your decision. Okay. But what about the diplomatic effort? Why is China not using its veto power in the UN to block the US on many crucial issues? So I think that it's important for China to step up its game, at least at the level of diplomacy, and use its power in multilateral institutions and so on to checkmate the forces of imperialism to the benefit of third world countries and so on.